Episode number 309 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. My guest today is Dech. Josh is a holistic nutritionist specializing in Crohn's and colitis and other related gut issues. After reversing over 250 cases of bowel disease, previously thought to be impossible to fix, he's been connected to some of the world's most renowned doctors. He's since been recruited to the Priority Health Academy as a medical lecturer, helping educate doctors on the holistic approach to gut health and inflammatory bowel disease. He has also launched a top 2.5% globally ranked podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Welcome to the podcast, Josh.
A pleasure to be here, Michelle. Thanks for having me on board.
Yeah, I'm very excited to pick your brain. We just had a little pre-talk. I'm excited to really get into all the details of the gut. Nowadays, we're starting to see just how impactful it is, but not just for, digestion, which is like most of the time when you hear about gut, you think, okay, how's my digestion? It's about everything. It's kind of like the center of everything. It impacts fertility. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to share how you got into this work.
I'd love to. Sure. I think my entire career, I often like to describe it as a series of accidents just pushing me into one direction or another. And I used to be a paramedic and I loved it. I loved being in healthcare, but it wasn't very long until I realized it was actually sick care. It wasn't what I wanted to actually be doing. I pick the same people up for the same things. Maybe 20% of your calls were actually trauma, like car accidents and stuff like that. The other 80+% was medical. So we're talking people coming in for the same issues, heart issues, diabetic issues, strokes, very preventable things. Almost 99% of them would be preventable through just simple lifestyle, nutrition, and basic changes. And, I ended up leaving that career after a short little stint and got into personal training in my early 20s. And that was more what I wanted to do. There's a woman who came to see me age 57, right at the beginning. And this story is just, it'll knock your socks off because it really shows you what's possible. So she's 57 years old. She came to see me. She was on 17 pills and a shot of insulin for breakfast. She had 9 more pills and insulin for bedtime. So we're talking 26 pills a day, 2 shots of insulin. She had a CPAP machine to sleep. She had high blood pressure. She was on disability at work as well on the list. So 27 floors up, if there was a fire, she had to stand there and wait for someone to come get her because she couldn't physically take the stairs.
Wow.
And that was the state of her health at 57. And so here we are 2 years later. She's 59 years old now. She's off all but 2 medications, no longer needs CPAP. She's no longer on disability. High blood pressure gone. It's totally normalized. Even her eyesight improved. She got her glasses prescription downgraded. And now here she is, 59 years old, Michelle. It gets even better. I told you, knock your socks off. They entered into her first weightlifting competition, and she broke a world record in the Raw Powerlifting Federation in Canada at 59 from previously being on disability. And this is the power, really, truly the human body to go from 26 pills and insulin and disability to breaking world records right till she was in her mid 60s, 62, 63, when she retired from weightlifting. But that's what the body can do. It's consistently all the time. It is working to heal you, to improve you, to rebuild you, to build you stronger. Yet somehow we find ourselves continually going back the other way. Oh, it must be because I'm older. It must be because, I'm just getting sick. It must be just genetic. It must be this, must be that. She was told all of her shit was genetic. None of it was. Her body was trying to heal her, but it wasn't given the tools, conditions, and circumstances to do so until it was. And then it did. And this is the power of, we'll say, holistic health is a super broad, overarching spectrum, but dealing with basics of nutrition and gut health and wellness at its root, we can see that the body is so capable of healing itself. And it's the most important thing you could ever do is give your body what it needs. That's
that
sort of
is
how we
so
got
powerful.
here.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful because I think that the big thing that really gets in the way is kind of how we view our bodies or how we're taught to view our bodies. I want to say that we're conditioned to view our bodies because I think on an innate level, we do know that we can heal ourselves. There's definitely like an innate knowing that you have, an intelligence that you connect with your body. But most people do not know, based on how we're educated, that their body can heal itself and that there is a
Yes.
choice outside of the 26 pills.
Yeah, right now you've been told there's nothing you can do. Right now you've been told your issues are genetic. Right now you've been told your only hope is medications to manage the symptoms. There's nothing that can be done. But what we need to understand, as I learned throughout my career going back to school, now specializing in gut diseases, our guts really are at the epicenter of most of these things. And once you understand how it works, how it's connected, and how it's responsible for every aspect of your well-being, I argue sometimes that it very well may be more important than our DNA. And once we can
Mm-hmm.
understand this concept, then we can start to look outside of what we think we already know, what we've been told, and it unlocks a whole new world for you. I'm singing Aladdin in my head now, a whole new world, but it opens all this stuff up for you. And then everything is possible. Everything you've been told becomes something of the past. Your whole paradigm begins to shift. And finally, you can look at yourself and go, wait a minute. I don't have to be on these medications. I don't have to just deal with this. I don't have to just live with this because my body is trying to heal me. What is it trying to heal me from? And then you start unraveling. That's the thread that pulls apart the whole sweater.
Yeah. And also inflammation is kind of at the heart of this because I know that it can impact so many things. I know for fertility, it can impact your uterine lining. It can impact egg quality. It's very much linked with things like endometriosis. I mean, there's so many things and it just goes on and on and on. So let's talk about inflammation because that's really at the heart of all of this. Like when you address the gut health, you're actually addressing inflammation. So talk about that. Talk about the Western approach to that and how you see inflammation occurring in the body.
Yeah. Inflammation is always a reaction. Your body is healing you from something. And in the westernized world, here's what I'll say. Imagine you're out going for a walk and you step on a nail and the nail goes right through your foot. And you go into your doctor. The doctor looks at that nail and goes, wow, it is really swollen, really inflamed, but it's kind of just part of your body now. There's nothing we can do about it. So what we're going to do is give you numbing cream for the pain. And if it gets infected, we can manage that as things get worse. In worst case scenario, we'll just cut your foot off. That's absurd. You'd lose it. You slap the doctor. But here we are, we're going in and you got, say, a gut disease where I specialize like Crohn's, colitis, and other gut disease. You go into your doctor, they go, wow, that inflammation's really bad. It's just genetic. It's part of your body. There's nothing we can do. We're going to manage it with, quote, numbing cream. So medication, anti-inflammatories. And when you get infected, we'll treat it as it comes up. And if worst case scenario, we'll just cut the organ out. You should be slapping your doctor just like you would if it were your foot because it makes no sense. Inflammation, the very fundamentals of it is your body healing you from something. So let's apply this to Crohn's and colitis, right? Where I specialize is Crohn's, colitis, and severe IBS. People are told it's genetic, it's autoimmune, there's nothing you can do. It is what it is. Oh, well, and we'll manage it or hopefully not cut out your bowels. Looking at this, it's not just genetic. It's not just autoimmune. It's not just unknown. And I can break those down in about 2 minutes there, Michelle, really for you to basically, those are the three legs that Western medicine stands on to say you have to medicate it. I can break those with their own data and say it doesn't make any sense. But the idea being these inflammatory conditions we're told we're stuck with, yet we can reverse them 99% of the time to full healing. Inflammation is your body healing you. We have to ask, what is it healing you from? So in the case of your intestines, well, it's autoimmune and genetic, it's attacking your own body. Well, what if your body is attacking something like your microbiome and your own tissues are caught in the crossfire, right? You get a nail in your foot, your body's not attacking your foot. That's not why you're inflamed. It's creating white blood cells or immune activity in response to attack the nail that's in your foot. We don't question that. We go, obviously it's infected. There's something that's wrong. When we get a condition like Crohn's or colitis or some other inflammatory condition, we go, oh, it's attacking me. That doesn't make any sense at all.
That's so interesting. So how do you see that specifically Crohn's? Is it the gut microbiome imbalance that's causing all of this? I think it's fascinating that you're saying this because I always talk about like symptoms being your friend. And it's actually just one of the intelligent aspects of your body to give you the alarm, to give you a heads up. Hey, pay attention. So
Yeah.
it is really fascinating to look at it that way rather than a nuisance.
Yeah, I see it cascading down as a few different things. So number one, we all have dysbiosis now. Dysbiosis just means an imbalance in bacteria.
Hmm.
But we know through the work of someone like Justin Sonnenberg that we can see what's called inherited dysbiosis. Our microbiomes are passed down from our mothers and her grandmother and her great great grandmother before that. We get these dysbiotic states handed down, and the more toxic our world gets, the more the dysbiosis becomes. So think of it this way, Michelle: great great grandmother. We'll just a round number just to visualize easier. Say they have 1,000 microbes. Great grandmother gives birth to your great grandmother, who's given 800, who gives birth to your grandmother, who gets 6, to your mother, who gets 400, to you, who gets 200 microbes. You now have inherited dysbiosis. Of course, your gut's getting worse, which explains the rise of gut disease we've seen over the last 50 to 75 years. We've seen these numbers compounding, gut disease getting worse. In the 1950s, Crohn's and colitis, there was about, I think it was maybe 5 or 10 in 100,000 people had this disease. To the 1970s, you're now 25 to 40 in 100,000 who have the disease. 1990s, you're about 150. And now today, it's 456. Almost 5% of people now have bowel disease in North America. And so what we're seeing now is this continual growth from like whatever it was, 0.0005% to 5% growth in bowel diseases because great great grandmother had 1,000. Now you've got 200. This is inherited dysbiosis. And there's a direct correlation to the amount of pesticides we use, to the chemicals we put on our food, to everything. Yeah. And now what happens, there's dysbiosis. This is the moat around the castle. This keeps the bad guys out. This is your defense mechanism. 90% of your immune system is made there, or 70 to 90%, I should say, up to 90% of your neurotransmitters, what your brain needs. All these leaks that happen in the gut when we're inflamed, it opens up the door for toxins to travel anywhere in the body through your lymphatic system or your bloodstream. And so we have our defenses lowered from 1,000 to 200, say. We don't have the same robustness to our body, which means other invaders, the moat is empty, invaders can enter the castle. So now we've got three big issues that really are the roots of bowel disease. Number one is going to be microbial imbalances. So this is that dysbiosis we inherited, which lets in overgrowth of fungus, which should be in our gut, but in smaller levels, it overgrows. We see overgrowth of E. coli. A big one I see, Michelle, is parasites. I'm talking 3-4 foot worms coming out of people, which has never been detected and will never be seen on your blood work from your doctor. So we see microbial imbalances. We also see toxins, which contribute to this number of 200. So pesticides. In 1990, right, we had, let's go back to the 50s. We talked about, say, 5 or 10 in 100,000, to 1990, where it was about 150, to today, where it's almost 456 per 100,000 people with bowel disease. In the 1950s, there was a handful of pesticides for use. In 1990s, it was 700 to 900. Today, it's 18 to 20,000 different pesticides approved for use in North America. And so this is a direct correlation. Also looking at processed foods and packaged foods and seed oil consumption, the decrease in natural foods like eggs and animal fats, the increase in these artificial foods that we're now taking in. I'm not even arguing are animal fats good or bad for your heart. What I'm saying is we've eaten less of them than ever before and have more diseases than ever before. And so we have to look at these correlations and go, wait a minute, something is up. Now, I'm a big fan of red meat and fatty tissues. I eat a lot of fat and a lot of meat, and my body's amazing. My blood is great, right? But this is what we see: microbial imbalances, toxicity from foods, from the environment, from other places. And then we have, again, a dietary nutrient deficiency. So diets, 60 to 80% of the standard American diet is processed, refined. It comes from a bag, a freezer, a box, or a drive-through. We have nutrients in our soil. Back in 2008, there was a study from the University of Texas who estimated you need 8 oranges today to get the same level of nutrition that your great-great-grandmother would have out of one single orange due to tilling of the soil, the pesticides, right? Modern farming. So we have dysbiosis, which leads to toxins coming out, or toxins contribute to this as well. We have nutrient deficiencies because our food is more fake. And then we have microbial imbalances overgrowing. No wonder your body's throwing a fit. Because since the beginning of time, whether you believe it was 5,000 years or 500 billion years, since the beginning of time, we've never had these issues. In fact,
Yeah.
still today, the further away you go from the Western world, where we're eating all this food and covered in these toxins and these chemicals, the further away you go, the less disease you see. There's a direct correlation to living back naturally. Hunter-gatherer tribes, they're like, what is infertility? What do you mean back pain? What arthritis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, kidney disease, liver disease, diabetes? What are those? They don't skin issues, acne. These are things we call normal. They've never seen it before.
Yeah.
And this is why.
That is
This is
so
how we get
crazy.
disease.
I mean, it's really crazy. It's crazy to think about. And it's crazy that this is acceptable and that there's no regulation and nobody's really protecting the health of the people. I mean, enough is enough. Like, it's just so frustrating.
I hear
Because
you.
because people know that it's bad. They know it and they do it anyway. And in many countries, many of these pesticides are banned. And they know that it can impact fertility. Now they're linking a lot of them. So it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating, for me to see my patients having to climb an uphill battle just so that they can protect their reproductive health. Like, it's just crazy. And also it's interesting that you were talking about how the dysbiosis is passed on from situations or conditions such as Crohn's disease. And it's interesting because, like, people would say, oh, it's inherited, it's DNA. You would think that it's kind of the DNA, but it's actually, you're saying that it's the dysbiosis that's being passed on. I'm sure there's some level of DNA, like susceptibility as well.
Oh,
but
sure.
that's kind of an interesting take or an understanding of it, because you're like, oh, okay, like that's not something that people thought about. And
Well,
we
I'd
know
love to-
very well that the mother passes on her microbiome to the baby.
She does. Yeah. I'd love to break those three things for you if I could, Michelle, in just a matter of minutes. We look at IBD, Crohn's colitis. It's just genetic. It's autoimmune, or there's no known cause. Well, we just talked about number one. These are the three pillars it stands on for your doctor to say it's meds for life or it's surgery.
So you're
That's what
saying
they have.
this is the perspective of conventional medicine, what you just said.
Yeah, sorry, let me clarify.
Yeah.
So if you've been diagnosed with Crohn's colitis or even IBS, you've been told it's genetic, or it's an autoimmune condition, or there's no known cause. That's what your doctor's told you to date. And they say your best bet is medication or surgery. That's your only hope. What I'm saying is none of that makes sense, and I'll tell you why. Idiopathic means no known cause. We just talked about 7 different causes: inherited dysbiosis, increase in toxins and chemicals. The last 100 years, we've had 80 to 100,000 new chemicals added to our lives, most of them in our food. And so what you put in your gut, you're going to tell me doesn't affect my gut? That's nonsense. That's number one. So there has to be a cause, because we've seen cases, even looking at the data per CDC, about 3 million cases worldwide in 1990. Today, it's 7 to 8 million. So cases have doubled, almost tripled in the last 30 years. So there has to be a cause. So it can't be unknown like they say it is. Number two, they say that it's just genetic. Well, 50% of those 7 or 8 million cases, North America is less than 5% of the population. They have 50 to 60% of all the world's cases of bowel diseases. So when 5% has 50% in the last 30 years where it's blown up, it cannot just be genetic. That would take thousands of years. And most of those things weed themselves out of the gene pool. The last one is it's autoimmune. Well, looking at the actual antibodies per studies, the ones that we see, even like P-ANCA, we call it. This one, 70% of those with ulcerative colitis will have this antibody. Well, it can be caused by mesalamine, a drug they use to treat Crohn's colitis, by stress, by fungal infections, by other bacterial overgrowths, antibiotics. These antibodies, only 40 to 60% have any antibodies at all. And the ones that do can be very well explained by nearly anything else that can go on inside the body, such as dysbiosis states, parasites, infections, antibiotic use. The very drugs, Imuran, azathioprine, the ones they use to treat Crohn's and colitis, can cause these antibodies. So it can't be autoimmune. And even if it was truly autoimmune, at least 50% don't have any antibodies at all, but you're treating it like it's autoimmune. So the 3 pillars they have to stand on, Michelle, to say you need drugs for the rest of your life. There's no hope for you. Your life is basically ruined. It's management, or we cut the organs out. None of it makes any sense by their own data. And this little perspective shift changes everything.
My God, this is so important. It's so important that people hear this because I think that we just take it for what it is, for truth, absolute truth when we go. And I've had the same situation for my irregular periods, but it could be anything. And then you're going and you get an answer that just doesn't seem to feel right. And you talk about the possibility to cure diseases. Can all diseases be cured?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I like to throw that question out there because the word cure is sort of a dirty word in the Western world.
Yeah, people are
It's not
afraid of
something
it.
they are, and most doctors
Yeah,
are because it's a huge claim to make. I
yeah.
cannot legally, in my practice, because I'm not a medical doctor, right? I work with doctors, I'm a physician's consultant, and that's all great, but I'm not a doctor. I cannot legally use the words cure, treat, or heal in the context of what I do. But what I can say is this. I believe all diseases have a root. Disease is not innate to your biology or DNA. We even talk about genetics, right? Let's go back to the genetic weak link of bowel disease. Sure, you get 5 people in a room, Michelle, you expose everybody to mold. One gets really bad periods. One gets Crohn's or colitis. One gets asthma. One gets Parkinson's disease. Another one gets nothing. Because when your genes are exposed, say dysbiosis, it puts stress on the genetic links, the genetic chain. When you're toxic or infected, it puts stress. There's a study called nutrigenomics, which is nutrients and genetics and their correlation and reactions together. We're depleted. So these genes are getting stretched and pulled on the chain. The weak link is the one that snaps first. So there's no doubt there's a genetic component to bowel disease or what you're dealing with. But there are things that are stressing that chain. If you can pull down the stress and give your body what it needs to simply function normally, you're going to be just fine. Your body's going to do what it has to do. It's going to heal itself. And these, quote, genetic conditions sort of just go away because they were never really genetic. It was just exploiting what may have been a weak link. You go, well, I've had my gene tested. I've got the MTHFR, so I can't methylate. I can't do this. Every form of natural nutrients that comes from the soil, that comes from animal meat, that comes from the earth in any way, your body will use and methylate. It's all the artificial or fortified versions. It's the folic acid they spray on the grains and crops.
Yeah.
It's not the actual nutrients from earth. It's the artificial stuff you can't use. So don't beat yourself up about it. Just
Ooh,
grow
I
your own
love that.
food.
It's so true. And it's so nice to hear it put in that way for people listening to this. That's a huge issue for a lot of people trying to conceive because for so long they've been having folic acid. And also if they're eating grains, even if they don't want folic acid, it's kind of like shoved in our faces.
Yes.
So we're forced to
Folic
eat
acid
it.
is basically poison. I mean, we know, right? Tested like MTHFR, popularized gene. There's a SNP in there, changes your morphology, how your genes will activate. 44% cannot use folic acid, but doctors give folic acid to 100% of women who are pregnant. Why? If you can't use the folic acid, it actually can cause blood pressure issues. It can cause all kinds of issues, cognitive impairment, anxiety, depressive issues, gut issues, probably fertility issues, right? I can't speak to that one specifically, but I would guess in the chain of events.
For some people,
well, there you go. So you're being given a drug that almost 50% of the population can't, I call it a drug because it's artificial, that you cannot use, that can cause other health complications. Well, no wonder you have gestational diabetes. No wonder you have hypertension.
Yeah.
No wonder you have these, prenatal conditions. The Western world treats pregnancy like a disease state. You are sick.
Yeah.
We have to treat you, but it's not. In the inflammatory markers you get from pregnancy, all these different things, they're actually normal and they're actually a biological beneficial process, which is also connected to your gut, oddly enough.
Mm-hmm. Everything's connected to your gut. So talk to us. It really is. The more I do this, the more I realize this. It's kind of like just everything's the center. Even Chinese medicine, the spleen and stomach are the digestive couple.
Mm-hmm.
And every couple, there's like a yin and yang pair of organs. Every one of them has a different direction. The spleen stomach is the center. It's kind of like where everything comes from. So it really is so important. And that's, it really comes down to your gut health. So talk to us about like what people can do and really how, like, kind of take us through like the inflammatory process or the anti-inflammatory approach to your gut.
Yeah. First thing is we just have to remove the nail. That's it. Mm-hmm. Your body is reacting to so much. And I describe it like this. Picture your body's like a cup of water, right? I got a cup of water next to me here. So picture this cup gets full and fuller and fuller. As the cup starts to fill up, you start to develop symptoms. I'm having menstrual issues. I'm having PMS. I'm having some infertility. I'm having some skin issues. I'm not sleeping. I'm having anxiety, depression, gut issues, etc. These are the symptoms you develop. Now, when that cup finally overflows, you now go into your doctor and they say, oh, you have this disease, because they're looking at everything that's gotten wet. They go, yep, this is just a condition. You have the floor is wetiosis, right? And they go, this is just what it is. We don't look at what led to it. We don't look at what contributed. Instead, we go, yep, it's just part of your disease process. It's part of your body. Here's some management for your symptoms. This is numbing cream on the foot. That's what it is, rather than taking the nail out. And so when we're looking at disease, understand something's filling your cup. And this is how we can begin reversing it. Number one, we have to look at what is filling the cup? So this is going to go back to your environment, back to your gut, your microbes, that when the defenses came down, the moat was empty, what came into the castle? That's number one. Number two, how do we drain the body? Because everyone talks about detoxing. You'll hear 10-day detox, 7-day detox, 24-hour detox is always something to sensationalize. But there's all these detoxes. Yes, your body is detoxing constantly on its own. And yes, sometimes it can use some support. There's a good reason for that. But something we often miss is called drainage. Detoxing is gathering the trash. Drainage is bringing it out to the curb. So yes, your liver, your kidneys, your bile ducts are one that most people miss, gallbladder and bile ducts. That's one of the most crucial parts of healing and inflammation. We have to look at your skin, your sinuses, your lungs, lymphatics, even your blood. These are all drainage or detox pathways. They help move and transport and organize toxins, but also get them out of the body. So sinuses, skin, lymphatics, etc. This is drainage. If we don't have this properly supported, I don't care how many parasite protocols you take or antifungal meds you take or how many detoxes you do. If it's not getting out of the body, it's just moving or it's still collecting. And so it's continuing to fill your glass. Right? Your doctor looks at all the things filling up your glass. They don't use it to figure out what's happening or what's causing it. They use it, what's called diagnostic criteria. So they are looking simply to check the symptoms, do their tests in order to meet what fits this box. Once you have enough checks to color in this box, we then can give you these drugs in this order. And if they don't work, snip, snip, here's your surgery. And the idea is, again, disease is innate. You just have these symptoms. Therefore, you just have this condition. There's nothing we can do. And here's how we'll manage. Rather than looking at your symptoms that led to the disease and reverse engineering the process. What is filling your glass and preventing it from emptying? If Western medicine did that, they'd be bankrupt, which is probably why they don't. Because you're talking the three biggest industries, Michelle, in North America are healthcare, so hospitalization, health insurance, and pharmaceuticals. It makes up 18% of the entire US GDP. So 18% of the entire income of the United States of America is healthcare. Yet they are the sickest country on earth. 6 out of 10 adults have some kind of chronic illness or chronic inflammatory condition. 6 out of 10. It's $4.7 trillion a year to manage disease. It'd probably be more like 50 to 100 billion. So pennies on the dollar, really, if you actually cured everything. So there is a huge financial incentive to not actually cure anybody.
That's so crazy.
That's messed up.
I mean, I think it's so messed up. I mean, it's really messed up. I think a lot of people know this. And there's definitely a lot of money moving around between the food industry and the pharmaceuticals, which, I mean, like why?
Yeah. Yeah. You get a CEO who goes from Bayer Monsanto, who, by the way, just paid out $11 billion with a B, $11 billion in lawsuits because their glyphosate product caused so many cases of cancer. There's over 100,000 lawsuits pending. They paid out over $11 billion with another 30 to 40,000 lawsuits still pending. And guess what? They're still allowed to use the product, even though it's been proven hundreds of thousands of times to cause cancer and other dangers. Because
it's so unethical.
Super unethical. We live in a horribly unethical system based on lobbying. Get one more for you. There's a chemical called chlorpyrifos. It's an organophosphate. Organophosphates are nerve agents. If you've ever heard of sarin gas, for example, used in the Tokyo subway attacks in the 80s, in Syria against the Halabja people, it's a nerve agent. It is a toxin, organophosphates, particularly sarin gas. Well, there's 800 plus organophosphates of the same class, these nerve agents, that are used on our food. One
Mm-hmm.
recently was reapproved for use called chlorpyrifos, just back in November 23 or December 23, was reapproved for use. Well, this was being explored in the 1930s and 40s by Nazi scientists as chemical warfare on humans,
Oh,
but they put it
man.
in our food. Then you get people going, well, the poison makes the dose. Okay, I get that. Yeah, if it was microns of chlorpyrifos, your body would get rid of it. But we got over 1 billion pounds of chemicals every year on our food that we consume. We've actually consumed now 4 times more pesticides per person than we used to in the 90s because there's so many more of them. The poison, the dose makes the poison. Yes. But we've also 17 times our dose. Of course, we're so toxic. Of course, everyone's
Yeah.
poisoned. And so these are the things we have to consider. But circling back, these are the toxins contributing to your glass filling up. So you want to empty the bathtub, turn off the tap, right?
Yeah.
So let's put a hole on the toxins. Simple as the clean 15 and dirty dozen list from the EWG, Environmental Working
Right.
Group. Go organic where you can, or just don't buy it, right? There's a lot of other ways. It doesn't have to have the organic label. I don't buy all organic. There's a farmer's market near my house. And I talk to
Mm-hmm.
the farmers. They do one fungicide spray at the beginning of the year on the ground, and then all their crops grow. That is a risk reward ratio I'm willing to accept. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
price, but there's one spray instead of the average strawberry has like 12 pesticides on it. And so that's what I'm willing to accept for myself, and I will adapt to the rest. And so turn off the tap, start changing out the toxic environment, start making some of these better modifications. One of the top toxins or pollutants for humans is actually recirculated indoor air. Open your windows, just where you can,
Yeah.
open them up, let some fresh air come in. And this we can start, this is turning off the tap. Then we can open our drainage and detox pathways. And then we can begin removing the invaders that came into the castle. And then we can begin repairing and rebuilding the walls and everything that was destroyed after these invaders came in. That's sort of the process affectionately typically referred to as the 5 R's. There's sort of an acronym we can use in there for that, but that's the idea.
Yeah. And a lot of people just say, oh, then I'll just get probiotics. But then I'm learning, that not all probiotics are created equal. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like just the different types of probiotics, everything comes out. Another company says, oh, ours is special because of this, that, and the other. Then there's spore-based probiotics, which are more likely to survive our entire tract. So I'd love to pick your brain on that.
I'd love to, sure. So spore-based probiotics, they're more like seeds, and they're typically coated to get to the large intestine. This is where 90% of your intestinal bacteria actually live, is in the large intestine, right where it connects to the small intestine, in that whole area there. That's where most of them live. And so the spores will get there. They're like seeds that plant and grow trees that bear fruit. We have other probiotics, which you're right, not all are made equally. A lot of them will come in, they're dead, but you still can get benefits. If you think about, let's go to pre, and postbiotics, right? The 3 things I think we often get mixed up. I think of it like fish in a fishbowl. Probiotics are the fish, the living organism that swim around in the bowl. Prebiotics are fish food, and postbiotics are what the fish poop out. If you look at your bacteria the same, they're your fish in your fishbowl. The living organisms of probiotics are the fish. This is what moves around and engages with your body. They do so much for you. They produce vitamins and minerals and nutrients. They help balance hormones and detoxify and help with your immune system. They do all kinds of great things, mostly through how they signal to the body. But then your prebiotics are what they eat. So this is going to be your fibers, it's going to be your carbs and starches, some proteins, but there's going to be some things that they will consume, which creates the postbiotics your body likes, the short chain fatty acids, the minerals, or the vitamins and all these things. And so when we consume probiotics, a lot of them we eat are dead. So you're still getting the postbiotic, or the bacterial poop, if you will, of all the benefits, which come in, come out in a couple of days. They might be very short term and they're kind of out the door. But along the way, they can have a lot of really good beneficial signaling to the body, to the immune system. It's like a radio signal. They come in and out, beep, 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 and they send signals back and forth. Your body makes changes. On the other hand, what a lot of people don't recognize is maybe if you have a condition like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, you have a bacterial overgrowth. Sometimes adding probiotics in, there are classes of bacteriums called bacteriocins, which will kill bacteria. So they might be beneficial in SIBO. For example, Lactobacillus reuteri, or reuteri, call it tomato. But this one can act as a bacteriocin, has been shown in clinical to be beneficial in a lot of cases for SIBO to reduce the bacteria. On the other hand, some might contribute to the problem. I had a client with parasites, and she was consuming a lot of probiotics, which were higher in histamines, which contribute to the issue because parasites also can create histamine issues. Even bone broth was bad for her gut because it's high in histamine. And so it made her issues worse. And so considering we got probably 1,000 to maybe 2,000 species, 7,000 to 9,000 strains of bacteria, makes 15 to 20 million different bacteria. In fact, there's 100, I think it's 130 times more DNA in your gut bacteria than you actually have in the rest of your body. 23,000 genes or so in your human genome, 3 million genes inside of your bacteria. So you take this handful of probiotics out of 3 million different genetic strains, it's like a grain of sand on a beach. It may help.
Yeah.
It may not. I wouldn't rely on them as a fix-all. And there's a lot of ways in there where you can actually cause more problems. You could put black sand on a white beach and you're going to notice it until it gets mixed in and disperses enough. It can create a problem. And so we have to really keep an eye on what we're putting into our body. I think throwing probiotics in sort of willy-nilly can lead to a lot of issues.
Yeah. What about spore-based, which are better for SIBO? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, spore-based, say they're better for SIBO. I've heard that as well. I think my initial thought is, look, they get to the large intestine, less so the small intestine, so we're not contributing to the small intestinal issues. But one of the contributors I do see of SIBO, for example, would be parasites. They tend to hang in the bile ducts, like we talked about there, the all important drainage pathways in the liver, the appendix, and what's called the ileocecal valve. So right where your small and large intestine will actually connect, parasites can hang out in these issues, actually messing with your valves. So even if you have spores going into the large intestine, they can still backflow because the valves will say are broken or jacked up, can get into the small intestine. And a lot of SIBO conditions are fecal microbes. So large bowel microbes getting into the small intestine where they should not be. And these areas can cause a lot of problems now too. So I don't know if I'd say they're better for, or maybe just less bad then, but maybe can contribute to the problem. It's hard to say. But ultimately, SIBO is a really nasty condition to have to deal with, but I've seen it as one of the roots that can develop into Crohn's or colitis as well, other bowel diseases.
Wow. And what about parasites? So what are some of the things that you can do because a lot of times you won't see that in like more generic tests.
Yeah, they're very difficult to detect. Parasites, even some of the best testing you'll get for stool testing, you're 40% accurate. Unless you're finding ovum, live worms or protozoa, eggs, etc. There's about 1 million different types of parasites estimated that are available on planet Earth. About 1,400 can infect humans. And, it's like, well, I've taken ivermectin, or I've taken mebendazole or fenbendazole, some kind of zol, which is supposed to be good for parasites, and they can be. But of the 1,400 types, you might not be targeting more than 3 or 4. And again, if your drainage pathways aren't open, you're not really going to be successfully clearing stuff. And so we're looking at parasites. I'd say testing is relatively inaccurate. We have to go by symptoms, and even blood chemistry. It's not something I'm an expert in, but I do know people who are very proficient in what's called functional blood chemistry. Well, they'll look at your blood work and go, definitely you have a parasite, and here's where I think it is, or what type I think it is, which to me is like wizardry. I just have no idea. I'm not that good at blood work, but it's really amazing art. And so testing is not amazing for them. Most doctors believe parasites are a third world problem because that's what they were told 20 years ago in med school. But look what we have, the level of immigration we have, the level of import-export we have, the level of accessibility for traveling all around the world that we have. Maybe if they used to be, but they're everywhere now, to the point where if you've got a pulse, you probably got a parasite. The question is it causing you a problem right now or not? Because parasites, fungi, bacterium, viruses, they all live in harmony in a healthy gut with great-great-grandmother's 1,000 microbes. But now we've got 200 microbes, this dysbiotic state, these opportunistic parasites or fungi or bacteria now overgrow because they have the room to do so. Nothing's keeping them in check. And now they're a problem. So this isn't to say parasites are all bad. Sometimes they're very, very good, but they're now becoming problematic because we're all so sick.
So what do you do? And what are some of the symptoms that people can have?
So many. So we look at parasites, again, going through symptomatology. I like that we bring this through because symptoms often speak louder than testing. This is something you have to keep in mind. Again, a parasite test at 40% accuracy can come back negative 10 times in a row. So we have to look at abdominal pain? Do you have pain when you palpate or press around the liver, the gallbladder? Do you
Mm-hmm.
have all your organs? So looking at tonsils, appendix, gallbladder, if you've lost those, there may be a parasite root. Back pain, hip pain, like joint pains, seasonal allergies or other allergies that seem to come up. If you have gut issues and gut symptoms, for example, that maybe come and go. So every couple of weeks they're up and then they're down, or seasonally, for example. This could be parasites due to their life cycles. High cholesterol or liver enzymes that are elevated, frequent sinus infections, anemia, because parasites will actually eat iron. They can eat tissue like lungs, liver, kidneys. They can eat iron. They can eat lymphatic fluids. If you got lymphatic issues, mumps chronically, tonsillitis chronically, these can be parasitic issues in nature. Even infertility. Parasites love, especially female reproductive organs. So PCOS can sometimes be a parasitic issue at the root, or a metabolic issue, which may have a parasitic component, because parasites can get to these areas in your body, will actually encapsulate them in a cyst or a tumor, hence cancers, which is actually a protective mechanism, or thought to be protective, where it's trying to enclose these things in rather than DNA mutating and causing a problem. We can have anxiety, depression, hair loss, early hair loss, liver enzymes are elevated. I think I mentioned that. Psoriasis, eczema, really classic symptoms. Rashes and hives. That's just a handful. There's probably 50 or 60 symptoms that could be parasites, but we have to go back to context. You have rashes and hives. Okay, well, it could be something else. There could be parasites. Let's look at the rest of the symptoms. I'm not saying if you have one of these things or all these things. I mean, if you have all these things, it's probably parasites. But if you just have a few, it could be something else, but I wouldn't rule parasites out.
Mm-hmm. And what do you usually do to treat them?
Great question. This is something that can be very finicky. Again, a lot of people I talk to, you're hearing this going, well, I've taken a parasite protocol, I've done a cleanse, it didn't help. You're trying to evict tenants from the building. Are the doors unlocked? Mm-hmm. And so if you're trying to get rid of parasites, is your drainage open? So we have to work on drainage support. And what we do with clients, it's a combination of a lot of things. There's supplementation, there's nutritional, there's lifestyle. Sometimes it's a combination of acupuncture, enemas, like coffee enemas. There's a lot of different things we can utilize to open drainage pathways, but everyone's different. And it's something that it really should be done under supervision. I know you're hearing this right now going, I can do that. I can do acupuncture.
Yeah.
It might help you. It might not.
It's important.
It is, but I don't want you putting yourself in the hospital. I have to say that, because we can move too many toxins too quickly. You can actually create a commonly known Herxheimer reaction, Herx, Herx. And this Herxheimer reaction is just basically you're taking too many toxins, you're mobilizing them, and your body can't get rid of them properly, and you're making yourself very ill. Yeah. So this is definitely a professional supervision issue, but these are things we can do. So number one is drainage in tandem with or post actually getting rid of or reducing your toxic loads. So no longer, turn off the tap. We have to open the drainage pathway so things can get out. We have to begin removing very systematically the problem. I've got clients, say 10 of them, who are taking the exact same parasite protocol for parasites, but what they're actually doing is that they're taking them 10 different ways, right? Some of them are tapering in 1 day on, 7 off, 1 day on, 6 off, 1 and 5. Some are doing full moon protocol. Some are high dose, some are low. Some are cycling through. Some are consistent dosing. Everyone's different based on their presentations, and going the wrong way can make people very, very sick as well. So it's a bit of a tailored and catered process, but the gist would be drainage support, anti-parasitic, supporting what your body lacks or needs, mitochondrial support, so cellular health and cellular well-being, because that's really where drainage and detoxing starts, is at the cellular level, not the macro level so much. And this is sort of a brief overview of what that might look like.
So interesting. And another question that I have, a lot of times you'll hear about the keto diet and how I'm not big on fad diets in general, because it's like everything's customized, but you hear about the benefits for some people. The thing with that is that there's barely any fiber. It's really, really low in fiber. So I just wanted to get your take on that.
Sure. It's really interesting. Look at someone like Michaela Peterson. Does an amazing job with the Lion diet, which is basically red meat, salt, and water. I am not against it. I think it's a great therapeutic diet. I'm not sold entirely. I've met with some amazing carnivore doctors and specialists, but I will say I don't believe plants are inherently bad for humans. I do believe an animal-based diet tends to be better, but the question has to be asked, is it the pesticides and the chemicals on our food that makes plants the problem? Is it plants themselves? Is it the GMOs and the crops that never existed even 100 or 500 years ago that we're not accustomed to eating? The arguments can even be made for dairy, where humans have only really domesticated dairy animals for 10 to 15,000 years. So are we really adapted to eating dairy? Have we developed or evolved these enzymes and processes to properly assimilate dairy? So the argument about plants versus animal-based, I can put it on a very macro level without getting to the nitty-gritty and say this. The bigger fish in the bowl, we talked about prebiotics, they eat fiber, right? The bigger fish in the fish bowl will eat first. If you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, we'll say opportunistic, they're causing you problems and they eat first, they poop out problematic things. So going to the lion diet, you're not going to get nearly as many microbes eating meat, for example, as they would fibers or starches or sugars. So if you cut those things out right away, you've reduced the poop or the byproducts, we call them endotoxins, of these microbes by simply cutting fiber. And so you may be starving some out. You may be just not getting overgrowths. You may be no longer contributing to poisons or toxins so much. And there's two arguments to be made. Well, the beef or the animal might filter the toxins. The other argument is what's called biomagnification, which is where it condenses all these toxins in the tissues, which you then consume. But you can't argue with the data. Millions of people all over the world go carnivore or keto and feel better. The question is, do I believe carbs are inherently bad for you? No. Do I believe they should be more sparingly? Yes, just simply biologically. But this is a big but. We have to understand that your current state of health and how it's utilizing what you're putting into it makes all the difference. Right? You can put gasoline into a car and it's going to drive for miles. You put gasoline into a car that's on fire and it's going to make a bigger fire. Right? So it's not the fuel source necessarily that I believe is the problem as much as the body you're putting it into and what's going on on a microbial level.
Oh, that's so important. And I think that, a lot of what you're saying is so important, but that's really the key crux of it, is that your body and your body's condition and your snapshot in time at this moment has unique needs, even unique to 5 years ago, the same body, which actually it's a different body because the body changes all the time. So it is really important that you work with somebody and not do this at home on your own and not self-diagnose, because it could be very tempting to do. This is great information, but just hold yourself back from self-diagnosing. Reach out to people like Josh. So actually, my next question, if people do want to work with you, how can they reach you? How can they find out more about your work and what you do and get help with their own gut and inflammation?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to help, Michelle. The quickest way to reach me, you can find everything you need through our website, gutsolution.ca. We got clients in 26 different countries and all the concurrent time zones. So don't worry about where you're located. We can help. That's gutsolution, all singular.ca for Canada. You can find our podcast, Reversible, where it's about the gut. It's all how all things impact the gut and vice versa. Michelle, we had you record an episode there recently, and it's how our gut and our world interact. It's called Reversible, the Ultimate Gut Health Podcast. And there's also one we released recently about, I'd say 6 or 8 weeks ago. It's called Reversing Crohn's and Colitis Naturally. And it's all about just Crohn's colitis and the cruxes and the roots and how we actually get at the root causes of these. But all that can be found, the website, the podcast, contact, help information can all be found at gutsolution.ca.
And how do you work with people?
Yeah. Contrary to what most people believe, we don't actually need to see you in person at all. Strictly through symptoms. I get photos if we need them. We'll have you take pictures of your fingernails, pictures of your tongue, for example. It's part of Chinese medicine, as you know. It can give us lots of information. We look at blood work. We'll look at your symptoms. We'll look at you as an individual. And I'll spend 30 minutes to an hour on a first call. We get someone through the program and register. There's probably 100, 200 different questions, extremely thorough intake. We do secondary interviews, then we do programming, and we actually work with you on a weekly basis for 16 weeks. Very hand-holding process. And that's what it looks like, because dealing with bowel disease, you know that things can change in an instant. You can go from healthy to a flare, or healthy to sick, to constipation, to diarrhea. What your doctor does is, here's a med, see me in 3 to 6 months. We'll see how you're doing. That doesn't help. You're barely managing, and your body can be so finicky. And so our job is 16 weeks. And I'll tell you, Michelle, we had a lady recently came out of our program, was working, not with myself, actually with Curtis, one of our other specialists. And 16 weeks, she came out after 15 years. She was diagnosed in 2013, a couple of years of bowel disease before that. Her colon was so severe, she described it as squirrels with razor blades running around on her insides.
Oh my God, wow.
So severe. They were on the cusp of cutting her bowels out. 16 weeks, she came back, her doctor's jaw on the floor. He's like, I've never seen anything like this. Perfect colonoscopy. She had one little speck left that we're still obviously going to be fixing, but it took 16 weeks. That's it. And not everybody responds as well. Some respond quicker, but this is what's possible. And I just really want to encourage, just if you're listening to this right now, you're like, I've got Crohn's colitis or even severe IBS. I've been told it's genetic, autoimmune. There's no known cause. So much can be done. Just start with the website. There's podcasts on there. There's information on there. There's videos on there. There's so much about it that we just want to creak that door open for you and show you what's possible. But again, just head to gutsolution.ca and do some diving.
Awesome. Josh, this is amazing. Really, really amazing. And also so important. I can't even stress it enough. I see it a lot, even in my patients that come in. And something that I think everybody listening to this, if you're trying to conceive, you have to go check out Josh and listen to his podcast and learn more, because I think it's so valuable. So thank you so much for coming on today. This is great.
It's been a pleasure, Michelle. And if I could leave one little nugget, if you're trying to conceive or have plans in the future, get ahead of the gut, because we talked about great grandma passing down this dysbiosis to you. You can pass down disease to your children. It'll be called genetic. I've seen babies, infants, I'm talking a couple of months to 2-3 years old with bowel disease, because we just didn't know ahead of time that we need to be dealing with our gut issues before having children, because these are the issues we can pass. All those opportunistic microbes, the fungi and parasites, they will come from you to your baby. And this goes both ways. The sperm quality has a lot more to do with it than we used to say, well, everything's up to mom. It is in development, but even the sperm quality, if mom or dad have gut issues, there's a much higher risk for your baby having some kind of issue down the road. And I just really want to encourage you, if you think there might be gut stuff or there's a diagnosis, start there long before conception. Not only will it help in your ability to conceive, but to carry a baby to full term and have a healthy baby to give them the best possible future. That's where we start. We have to start in your guts.
So important. Thank you so much, Josh.
A pleasure, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.